May the words of my mouth and the meditation of mine heart be acceptable in Yahweh's sight. He is our strength and our Redeemer. And it is in His name, which is His authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect today's message. Aman, 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 aman again. Hola, mi nombre es Kofi. ¿Cómo está? Bonjour, je m'appelle Kofi. Ça va? Ni hao, namaste, osayo, anakitawaya, ohasayo, Ohio. I see you. Abadigani, manut, aquaba, etese, kamsamida. Jambo, Mimini Kofi, Nina Farah Kukatana Wewe. Hello, everybody. This is Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being a voice of the voices and speaking the unspoken. Shabbat Shalom, Bakwatav, Barakalad Shem Yahava, A'ana Kofi, Head of Servant of Christ, Mashalom Hey. Hello, everybody. We give all honor and praise to the Most High. Yahweh Elohim. We give all praise and honor to Him for my wife, the Honorable Maya, who lives a life that's able to be honored. You can check her out on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest at Bloom and Flourish, not A&D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. She is a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree for those that need a little extra oomph on there. And we thank you so much for being on and supporting her. Thank you again to everybody. Once again, to the moderators, I thank you. I bow down. Appreciate you. To the ministerial staff, the stuff that you do behind the scenes is not only necessary and warranted, it is appreciated. To SOC family, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for being on. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, if this is your first time, one of many, whatever the case might be, we appreciate you and we thank you. And we're honored to have you here with us one more again. Before we get into the message, as a reminder, we do have some other stuff after today. So we're doing the live session right now. We're going to get ready at 10 a.m. to go into the podcast, the Kofi 40 podcast. So that'll be at 10 a.m. Eastern New York time. At 11 a.m. Eastern New York time, we'll have our Shabbat Beit Sefer, or Shabbat Bayat Savad, our Shabbat school for our children. So if you don't have the link and you'd like to be part of that, feel free to let us know. At 12:30 p.m. Eastern New York time, we will then have a SOC meeting for everybody. A couple of things of importance on there. We're going to make sure that we get some schedules, stuff going on for people of different regions, so we can get back into that again and let the ministerial staff start kind of cooking and flowing on that. And also, we need to just kind of do some reminder stuff concerning SOC business, especially concerning membership, just to kind of go over those things again, those items again. And then what we would like to do after that, 5 o'clock p.m. Eastern New York time, MITs, we have our training. And then at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern New York time, we have our women's meeting. And for brothers, we'd like you, if you can, to support Minister Tama at 7 p.m. At what she does on her platform, live session every Saturday at 7. Aman. Alrighty. So thank you guys for being on. We appreciate you. Let's go ahead and get into today's word. And today's word, although short and sweet, because of all the stuff that we have coming up, it is necessary. And it speaks to some negligence that we have. So prayerfully, you've come with an open mind and an open heart to receive and receive a message that might be a little confrontational to your spirit or your soul or your walk where you are. However, it's something that is necessary and mandatory for us to start speaking about more regularly. We speak about it. We speak about it somewhat already, anyways, but we'd like to have a little bit more conversation and speech on it today. And so today's theme, if you will, is it's called Israel. We have a problem. Israel, we have a problem. We've heard Houston, we have a problem. Today I want to talk about Israel. We have a problem, right? How you doing, Sister Nadine? Thanks for being on, everybody. Let's say hello to you real quick and let's jump into this. How you doing, Robin, Cheryl's, Yeshua, the true king of the earth, MIT Tracy, Sister Renee, King, Romac, Praise Yah, Blue, Sister, did I say Sister Nadine already? I don't know if I didn't. Well, anyways, hello, Sister Nadine. I think I said Sister Nadine earlier. That's where I think the confusion is coming. How you doing, Sister Joy? Everybody who's on, we appreciate you, Brother Jermaine. 38. Well, what time is it where I'm at? It would be, well, at that time it would have been 8:13. So you're probably on the West Coast, I'm assuming. Don't know if it's Canada, United States, Mexico. Probably Canada, United States, but thank you for being on with us. How you doing, Sister Barbara, Mr. Brett? Thanks for being part of the community. Joy, yeah, everybody, Miss Hibiscus, Haskins, Money Green. Hello, Sister Deja, Sister Kimberly, Lottie Dottie, everybody. How you doing, Brother Alton is on, Sister Sherry, Sister Irena, peace be well. Sister Knight, Sister Irena, happy belated born day one more again. Hopefully you and the family are doing well. Today's topic, Israel, we have a problem. Sister Kimberly, if I didn't say so already. Today's topic, Israel, we have a problem. And here's the problem. The problem is that all of our business is going to be put on Front Street. I'm not talking about just SOC today, by the way. I'm talking about Israel. We have a problem. Your business is about to be put on Front Street. It's being put on Front Street now. If you're going to say that you're holy, right, and you're going to say you're a city that's set upon a hill, what's about to happen is people are going to look up to the city. How you doing, Sister Betty? If you say you're the light of the world, people are going to start to look at the light that shines upon them, which means that people are going to give you criticism. And that's part of everyday life. Criticize away, criticize away, criticize away. Problem is, though, is that there's some things that should have been criticized in-house that we should have gone ahead and taken care of, that we should have gone ahead and shown, that we should have gone ahead and brought light to. And now what's about to happen is it's about to be some light's about to be shined, some serious light. It's about to be shined on different things that we're doing. And we're not in a position to make sure that we can guard against it. And we're going to have to play catch up, unfortunately, because a lot of people who are in whatever positions they're in, are teaching whatever they're teaching, are fighting against each other in-house, have not taken constructive criticism at all, let alone very well. And now this stuff is about to be put on Front Street. You know, this has been happening to other organizations that say that they are of the truth for many, many years. And I guess we've been, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe we've been too full of ourselves. Maybe we've been thought that it can't happen to us. Maybe, you know, and I've had some of this happen to where we've had to start addressing stuff in-house as well recently. Hey, how you doing, Sister Beverly? We've had to address a lot of stuff in-house as well. Yeah, certain things have remained dormant, whatever we want to talk about. Certain seeds have been planted and we didn't make sure that, or certain trees even been planted and we did not pluck them up by the root. And so some of the things that we've seen with everybody else, they're about to start happening because we cannot take constructive criticism and we will not get better. And we are doing the same stuff. So for example, you know, just recently, you know, there's a group of Jehovah's Witnesses that got caught doing the stuff underage children, things like that. We know that there's stuff like Lev Tehor, if you're familiar with that Jewish organization, which acted like a lot of camps are trying to act now, where they were doing all types of wild stuff to women and children. There's been obviously a lot of that that's happened with the Roman Catholic faith, amongst many other Protestant faiths as well. You said your people have no business messing around with Abrahamic religions. Well, what is the comprehension of what an Abrahamic religion is? Are you coming from a perspective to where we must be down for the oppressor? Or are you coming from people such as Olawata Hequiano and Flavius Josephus? You see, so some of that even is in-house. We need to start dealing with that because even some of our own people are talking about things as if I'm speaking from the perspective that you're going from. You know, you have to lay that down to tell us what you actually mean, right? Just going, oh, you guys are terrible. But see, and I don't mind the criticism. So give us the criticism and let's deal with it in house rather than we're just going to go ahead and tell you this. So see, the criticism is coming. It's supposed to come. It's supposed to come. And I'm okay with that. How you doing? Thank you for the love. How you doing, Queen? How you doing, Sister Knight? How you doing, Coco? Everybody's coming on. Right. So be ready for the criticism. That's that. There's no problem with that. Be ready for the criticism. Matter of fact, we've had people who have claimed that they were going to do what we're doing now. And once again, I'm not just talking about SOC. I'm talking about Israel, right? Yasta. We've had many people who have claimed these things. We've had people such as Yahweh ben Yahweh, right? And we could say that there's some things in the community that they did that were great, but if you study that whole camp and people that have come out of that camp, the reason why people look at IUIC, for example, or the reason why people look at those who come out of Baltimore, or the reason why people are looking at camps the way they do, is because you might not know about Yahweh ben Yahweh, what that group, not just what he, but what that group or that camp of belief did, and what they actually did to where they did stuff that terrorist organizations, or at least people who start as terrorist organizations, do. So now people are So this is a great example. So now, if you don't know that they were, pimping women, and if you don't know that there was a lot of lust and lasciviousness, if you don't know what they were doing to underage girls, and forcing them into marriages and stuff without actually making sure that they were doing things correctly, lawfully, legally, if you don't know things that were stolen. I'm not saying that they had nothing right to say at all, but hear what I'm saying. There were things that were let go. There are a lot of those people who still are running the streets as gangs now, official gangs or unofficial, but you know what I'm saying, what we would call a real gang, who came out of that mindset. And a lot of people, that's why when you hear a lot of people preaching and teaching, they sound like the streets because that's what they were doing. And so now there are a lot of people, and we'll do this. And I used to even be one of them to a certain extent, where we do have to defend ourselves when people say, up, you hear Black Hebrew Israelite, nobody calls himself Black Hebrew Israelites, and that was something that was given by the FBI and the CIA, and they don't like us, and so here's something else that they're just adding to their list to be able to say that they are warranted to be able to mistreat our people, etc. And that's true to a certain extent. To a certain level, there's truth in that, right? However, we also have to admit that there were things, including selling drugs and other things, that this group was doing, to where now, guess what? The FBI is looking at you. So when you mention your faith and your belief, somebody has twisted that faith and that belief to the point to where somebody's not looking at it the way you are, as far as from the pure perspective. And if you're not careful, you might attach yourself to somebody who's automatically saying that they are you and they are not. You were watching that last night, see? So there's a lot of stuff we might not recognize and realize. How you doing, King Raj? Right, blessings to you. See, so, and how you doing, Black Steel? How you doing, Miss Leader? So we have to, and yeah, we are very emotional, right? And we can't come together on some of these things, but also we have to be careful. See, Israel, we have a problem. We need to start criticizing, having this constructive criticism. How you doing, Sister Deborah? How you doing, Surfing with y'all? We have to start having this constructive criticism in-house. In-house, right? And we can't do what we've done before so many times. Up, I don't like what's going on. I'm leaving. I'm going to be part of another church. I'm going to be part of another. Or you're going to have to start to fix this stuff in house before you cause whatever splinter group you're trying to cause again. And you talk about how you're going to go here, do this, and how up, see, I blah, blah, or hey, I'm just not going to be about the truth whatsoever, or I'm just going to do it by myself and my family's going to start the next. If you want this thing to be reality, if you're talking about nation building, I'm here to tell you that a nation comes with issues, comes with problems. How you doing, Sister Valerie? Thank you for the love. How you doing, Albert? How you doing, Brother Javon? Nation building, it comes with problems. No nation is perfect. Yah's nation is being perfected, but we come with problems. You can't talk about, as much as people want to talk about 400 years. How you doing, off grid? 400 years of oppression, and then act like because you picked up a Bible that you're coming with no mental baggage, that you're not coming with any PTSD, that you're not coming with any PTSS. See, and we have a problem because the rabbis are the ones who can't be criticized. See, the rabbis say, I have no problems. You become the Ezekiel 34 um, shepherd, even if it's by accident. You become the shepherd that eats off the sheep and has the sheep in their mouths, right? As wolves would. And the sheep themselves, you live off of the fat of the sheep, and the sheep themselves do not eat. But Yahweh asks a question in Ezekiel 34. He says, should not the sheep eat? Why are the shepherds eating, but the sheep aren't getting fed? How you doing, Sister Austria? In a sense, you have made the calves, right? You have made the calves skinny. And at the same time, you're trying to eat. You're eating the 7 years of plenty, and then when it starts to get to the 7 years of nothing, not only have you not saved up anything from your people, but you're eating off of the skinny calf now. Not realizing that the unfed, right? If you don't get the reference point, we're talking about what was in Kemet, right? And what the 11th, our 11th head, or 11th seminal head, Joseph, said, right? And gave in the dream. But see, what's happened, if you're not careful, those calf, those members, those family members, those people, Yashla'al, who's not eating now, who's skinny, is going to turn around and start eating off of those who are fat, right? If we are not careful. we're about to get into a place. See, Israel, we have a problem. How you doing, Renaissance? We have not fed our children correctly. And now our children are acting up, and we're saying, what's wrong with these children? You did not feed them. You fed off of them. And if the shoe fits, wear it. If it doesn't, take it off, right? So this is, if you're somebody that doesn't apply to, hey, praise God. If you're somebody this applies to, you need to change. If you know that there's some people that this has happened to that applies to, be ready for this. See, because you were raised in a generation, I know we don't want to admit this, but we were raised in a generation, and some of us were raised in generations now, who have decided that it's hard for me, or sometimes because of just lack of accountability financially. Also, though, because it's hard out here, hey, I'll make sure I ruin my child's credit while they're not even a preteen yet, and I'll put electric bills in their name and do this and do that, right? And then when they get to a level to where now they need to start doing stuff on their own, they have an uphill battle, to say the least, because everything is messed up. Right? Because everything is messed up. How you doing, GJT? Yahweh bless GJT, heal them, bless them in everything that they need. We thank you for allowing them to come on, whatever it is that they are in need of. Give them a blessing, and in Yahweh's name, Amen. All right. Sorry, I can't really go in depth. I got to keep teaching, but thank you for being on. Right. We hope that you feel better. So these are the things that we must realize, that like we're dealing with a generation that's been fed off of, and then we're trying to figure out why are they acting the way that they're acting. We're trying to figure out. We watched mothers and fathers, right, act crazy in these things that are supposed to be marriages, and and then we say, well, why are people not even wanting to be married? Why is it that everybody's teaching about marriage is how not to be married? Excuse me, I'm gonna shift over just a little bit. I don't want the sun to get on us. I thought I was straight, but I'm not. Hold on one second. The sun can mess around and be so hot that it'll stop what we're doing. I was trying to not be under the trees because the water's leaking down from when it rained earlier, but it is what it is. I was trying to stay from underneath the trees because the water it just finished raining. The water's still leaking off the trees. Hopefully, prayerfully, it doesn't mess up our devices. But see, we have a problem. We have an issue. We have a generation that's been messed up. How you doing, Sister Leslie? We have a situation where our people are messed up. We talked about this last night. Where art thou? Adam, where art thou? And see, when we talked about this last night with the uncovered man, what does he do? The uncovered husband, right, causes a wife to be uncovered and causes curses that we're still walking around with. We talked about last night how there's a curse. And yes, we don't recognize it as a curse. How you doing, Sister Tamaya? But we need to start recognizing it and realizing that we need to change these things. Right? There's a curse. Our sisters, right, will look for their husbands, right, towards securing them and giving them affection. And the husbands will use this to rule over them. Well, why is this? Because husbands have not been taught how to be husbands. How you doing, Sister Helen? Israel, we have a problem. Israel, we have a problem. Our brothers at SOC, I promise you this. We've actually started talking about it. We're going to actually kind of step up what we're doing as far as our men's meetings and stuff. Even as often as we have them, we're going to have them more often and everything, right? Because we realize that a lot of stuff that we're seeing, it starts with us. And when we started talking about some of the issues that are going on with our sisters and our children, and then what the brothers are not doing, some of the brothers were fired up. And they said enough is enough. And we already been doing some of this stuff, but now we got to step it up. We got to check on these sisters more. We already been checking and making sure people lose jobs and stuff. We kind of been looking out for them and stuff. We got to step it up. We have to be the ones that are responsible. But once again, Israel, we have a problem. How can we step it up if there's a bunch of brothers out there that will tell you that they do not need? You hear what I'm saying? There's a bunch of brothers out here who are saying that I don't even need somebody to tell me when I mess up or when I'm doing wrong. I don't make any mistakes. You can't talk to me about this or that or whatever. They're preaching and telling you how it's going to be 7-1, getting these sisters out here to where they're dealing with now the 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 8 brother. You know, the brother who's busy telling you, or I'm sorry, 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 6 and 7. Really, if we want to put it together, where you have, I hope I'm saying the right verses. I'm somewhere in the ballpark. 2 Timothy chapter 3 verse 6 and 7, I believe, where it says that there are brothers who are out there who's supposed to be teaching and preaching, who we should turn away from, because they are out there looking for women who are heavy laden in sin, right? Who are in an environment to where sin is always around, and they got these sisters and they put them in a position to where they are ever learning, always learning, but never coming into the knowledge of truth. Israel, we have a problem. We can't receive criticism from outside the house until we first start to develop critical thinking from inside the house. Can you see the problem? Can you see how it develops? This is the issue. Every time that we have black men ain't this, black women ain't this, that's not our culture. Somebody from outside taught you to be against each other. How you doing, Sister Aliens? Somebody taught you to hate each other. Who taught you to hate your hair? Who taught you to hate your nose? Who taught you to hate your eye color? Who taught you to love colorism more than you love each other? Who taught you to hate your language? Who taught you to say that you need to have the ability to be able to code switch and go between one way that you speak and then lift up somebody else's as a way of doing so that you'll be accepted by your people just enough by placating them, but at the same time you have to make sure that you really bow down to the masses, right? There's a culture that taught you that. Who taught you what it was to be romantic, to where you still want to be Roman and have Roman antics? We have to deal with that. That's on our docket. Why is everything else and everybody else's stuff on our docket? Israel, we have a problem. People are about to start calling you out, and they should, not just because you've been doing wrong, but they should because of who we are. Right? People should call you out because of who you are. If they hated the Messiah, why would they not hate you? So don't get frustrated and upset when somebody calls you out. That's mandatory. Right? That's mandatory. Somebody hating you because of who you represent is mandatory. Right? If somebody doesn't like me, my son needs to be aware that there are people that don't like me. He doesn't need to be told that everybody's going to love you. My son needs to be aware that there are people who do not like his father, and therefore they will not like him. How you doing, Brother Ali? He needs to be aware. He needs to be he needs to be told that. He needs to be made aware of that. He needs to make sure that he recognizes that. He needs to have all that in him. He needs to be aware that his father is not liked by some people. His father even has to deal with some stuff in-house that's wild. And therefore, as he grows up, he needs to be prepared for that. Right? Yeah, amen. You got to let your children know. If your child, right, you must comprehend that if your child is dealing with stuff to where one parent uses the other parent against the other, at some point the child is going to have to be made aware of that. Whether you make them aware of that or the Most High brings darkness to light, something's about to happen. But see, it would be better for your child. It would be better for your community. It would be better for your society. It would be better for your culture, right, to be given the way that it is. And so therefore the people that you're with, they should know from in-house. You said you have a nation, you don't have proper leadership. Well, if you don't have proper well, first of all, leaderships are leadership over environment, right? So when we talk about proper leadership, Yahshua says it like this, and I agree with you but to a certain extent, because it's about holiness, being whole. The whole community is supposed to be leading together, and that's one of the things that we're missing is us coming together as a whole. So watch this, Matthew chapter 5. This is Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, verse 20. You should know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. The problem with the leadership piece, unfortunately, is not just that we have bad leaders. That would be bad enough if it was just okay, we got bad leaders. The problem is that people who are going to come under leadership do not find it necessary in any way, shape, or form, for whatever reason, have not found it necessary that they should ensure that they know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. right? For example, in the United States of America, you just go with whatever somebody tells you. Doesn't matter if what they're telling you is true or not, right? Here's the problem with that. Why is it that you don't know UCC 1-308 whenever you sign a document that protects your rights? Why is it that you do not know that you can do a bill of exchange? If a creditor calls you, why are you getting into facts and details and all this stuff when the reality is if the creditor calls, they're calling because they bought your debt, right? Why is it that you don't know that the United States is not a country, but it's a corporation by law, by United States code? I'm not talking about what we think or what we feel. 28 USC 300215A says it's a corporation. 28 USC 300215B tells you that it's a board. 28 USC 300215C tells you that it's publicly traded. And what you think is a capital, Washington, D.C., by law is a territory, and the territory is not even officially a territory anymore because Virginia asked for the land back, but they can't really give Virginia the land back because Congress has no authority outside of Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is subject to Congress, so it has to exist in a fake version of what the straw man is called the United States Corporation. That's property law. Why do we not know that, right? Why do we not know what marriage is? You think that marriage has to be something where you go to the state and you submit yourself to the state, but marriage is a private contract. At least it can be. You see what I'm saying? Like, but once again, you don't know the law greater than the scribes and the Pharisees. So now here comes Yahweh ben Yahweh. Here comes Pastor Kofi. Here comes I don't know how I don't even know everybody's name. Here comes Rabbi this or teacher this or Marah this or sister so and so or brother so and so, whatever they call themselves, apostle so and so, bishop so and so, and they tell you something, and you're not aware of how your culture works. See, what this leadership should do is basically be able to tell you things that are based off of the word already, because Yah will not go outside of his own law, his own word. So if you don't know the word enough to be able to say, first and foremost, are they even saying things that sound like the voice of Yah? Because Yah's sheep will know his voice. See, we've got to correct some stuff in house. How you doing, Brother Vincent? We don't even realize and recognize, right? Even when it comes to sovereignty. People hear sovereignty, they go, oh, I don't want to be a sovereign citizen. Right there, it's very clear that you're listening to somebody on the news or listening to somebody that hates you being free, because there's no such thing as a sovereign citizen. Either you're a citizen, U.S. citizen, or you're a sovereign. You're a non-citizen, national, or private. You're either public or you're private. Now, as a private citizen, you can be in the public, but you're never supposed to be of it. That sounds like being in the world or in the cosmos or in the system, but not of it. Once again, though, here we are where is anybody in leadership speaking like this? Because that's how Yahushua spoke. That's how Yahuwah spoke through his servants. That's how the Ruach HaKodesh should speak to you. How do I know? Somebody will say, how do I know if that's really the Holy Spirit? Is the Holy Spirit bringing you into remembrance? You were a member of these things. You were dismembered from it. Now you're being brought back to be remembered, to be reattached to the body again. And here you are, supposed to be coming back into the knowledge of this, but who's talking about this? How you doing, Sister Patricia? Yeah, try every spirit to see if it's a spirit, or as the scripture would say, try every spirit to see if it's of Elohim, because that's what we say lovingly. And I think even there's a version of it that says, try every spirit by the spirit. But we would say, Yahweh would say, try every spirit to see if it is of Elohim. So test it out, try it, tempt it, but you got to at least test it. How do you test something and you don't even know how to test it? Question for you, right? How do you test something? How do you tempt gold, but you don't know how to tempt it? So everybody keeps talking about being tempted, but you don't know the process of tempting gold. How do you become a diamond when it talks about you being a diamond, being cold and being turned into a diamond, and yet you don't know the process of tempting? And then once it's made a diamond, pressurized and everything, do you even know the process of what's done as far as the cutting process, the burning process, the appreciation? You have to appreciate it. That means you have to have somebody look at how much value it has. Thank you for the love. Appreciate it. You see what I'm saying? We have this odd perspective on things that we haven't even studied. I've said this before and I'll say it right now. It's very interesting to me that we have many people that have been to Bible college and seminary, and I have been myself, right? Got the degree and all that stuff, got the t-shirt. But we have all these people that have been to Bible college and seminary, and yet they haven't been taught about monarchy. How do you preach a kingdom and you don't know how king's kingdom works? How do you talk about using your gift and you don't comprehend that whenever you visit the king or the queen, for that matter, you're always supposed to bring a gift. How do you know how to go before a king or a queen and you don't know how to curtsy? We talked about this before with Meghan Markle, right? First and foremost, look, Meghan Markle's not wrong to say that she dealt with racism, this and that, or whatever. But see, watch this, Meghan. You're being married into a family to where, and some of you might not have even seen these pictures and known this as deep as it is. But when you go, when I go back home to Shwe Nation, what you would call it's in the land of Ghana, modern Ghana. So when you go back home to Ghana, and you go and visit the mausoleum, the tomb of, and not the original tomb, but where his body was put, of people like Kwame Nkrumah, and you actually, if you can, grease the right palms, right, and they'll let you in, and you get to see certain things that other people don't see, things that aren't taught, things that a lot of even the people that live there don't see. How you doing, Sister Judith? Because we have this mindset that just because they live over there, they know stuff that we don't know. They're having knowledge being withheld from them as well. Thank you for the love and how you doing, Sahara? Right? But you'll go and you'll see stuff, and they'll let you in this nice. It's small. It's kind of big, but it's small for what you would think a museum would be. But you walk in there and you'll see all the stuff that belongs to Kwame Nkrumah. Start looking around, and you'll start seeing. Oh, wait a minute. There's Queen Elizabeth on the wall, dancing with Kwame Nkrumah. Oh, that's right. Because in your mind, you be forgetting sometimes how close you are to apartheid. So she's right there dancing. The same Queen Elizabeth that did what she did through help with the corporation, of course, but did what she did to get to make money and live off of Igbo Nation and Yoruba and Nigeria, right? Or to go down to see what they did to Zulu, or see what they did in Swaziland, or to go see what they did in South Africa, which South Africa is still dealing with some of the stuff in South Africa. Didn't come out until 1992. We officially, on paper, in Ghana came out of this stuff in what, 1960? Forgive me, y'all. 1963. I might be off on that, right? However, we came out in the 1960s, but then Kwame Nkrumah starts to build a government, says that we can go ahead. We've got stuff like cocoa beans and all types of stuff that we can produce. And then all these people went and they put the same people that said we were free, made sure that they put a freeze on us being able to come in and out and trade. So now the people, then they put people on the ground who they pay to start a campaign, a smear campaign against Kwame Nkrumah, who would basically put MLK and Malcolm X together. That's how powerful this brother was. And so then they have it where he has to flee the country that he helped to be able to make sure was free. And now the country goes right back into European control without being under European control. Right. And so when we talk about this, we have a problem because here's somebody who dedicated his life to bringing his people out, but because his people were not educated, or they were not making sure. See, watch this. We do this a lot. We'll have leaders who say, just follow us, but we got to educate you and make sure that you're ready and prepared. You can't be a soldier. I've been in the United States military. Don't talk about being a soldier or an airman or a Marine or a sailor, right? And then you're not ready to fight. You got to go through training. And then not only that, you got to go through more training. Once you finish, like I'm gonna use Navy language in the military and other branches, they might call what I'm calling NEC MOS. But you get your NEC before you even go in. Your NEC is your job, right? That's what you're going to do. That's mainly what you're going to do. You might even be able to pick up multiple NECs, or you might be able to switch an NEC. NEC once again means MOS if you're not familiar with the NEC term. But you go in with an NEC. You go to boot camp, and sometimes your boot camp, depending on what your NEC is, will even be geared specifically towards that NEC. But they at least make sure everybody's got the basics. When you come in the military, this is what we all do. We're going to cut your hair. We're going to all look the same. We're going to march the same. We're going to sing the same songs. We're going to do the same exercises. You're not going to really talk to your parents like that. You're not going to talk to your girlfriend like that. Any of that. You belong to us because you need to get yourself together. Just like Hashfai, before he got baptized, he went to boot camp too. Lavak HaKodash, took him into the wilderness, and he had to be there. And he had to sit down, he had to be there in the wilderness, and he had to fast for 40 days before he even went through his final test, where then the devil comes after the 40 days and tempts him on three separate occasions, not the same day, by the way, either. So he still was fasting through all these things. He had to go through a boot camp, and then those things happen, but he had to be baptized. See, the baptism is like, for those of you in the military and you went to the MEP station and you had to stand up and put and stand at attention and put your right hand up, and you had to swear an oath. What is an oath? An oath legally, an oath is considered to be you a swearing to a deity or swearing to a god, right? So you would make your oath, and then you had to go in and you had to be enslaved. You belonged to the system. You were a slave. You belonged to the system. Well, that when the Hashvai got baptized, and when you get baptized, that's supposed to be your baptism into what you before you get in. They tell you what's going to happen. They even work with you. They train you a little bit. They tell you what's going to go on. They make sure that they get your duty station stuff together, where hopefully they can promise you can go here or there. But then you go through boot camp. That's what baptism is when you're making that MEPS declaration. Then you fast for 40 days or so, or you got to start releasing some things, getting some toxins out, getting some of that world out, because now once you finish, you're about to go into training with your NEC. In the Navy, they would call it your A school or your C school. You're going to go, or your A school, and then you might go back to C school, excuse me. Sometimes, depending, like if you're a nuke, you might have A school and C school. You might be in school for like 2 years before you finally can do some stuff, right? But you're going to go through school, and then after you go through school, unless you're somebody who's just going to be a recruit that's just going to kind of be almost like infantry version, like what you would say infantry in another service. But if you're not going to be basically what equates to infantry, you're going to go to school, and then we're going to send you to your first duty station. Then you're going to go to your first duty station, right? In the Marine Corps, you would go to boot camp, and then after you finish boot camp, you would then go to another boot camp. And that second boot camp is like 3 months. Now it's a little more lax, but you're still in boot camp basically. And then you might go to your first duty station or go to your school. Either way, you got to go through some training. How you doing, Darius? Either way, you have to go through some training, right? And so the problem is that we have all these people who come out. See, it's not just our leaders that are trained, but the people are trained if you're in the military. Well, right now, what's happened is you have a bunch of people who are not trained coming out and looking for leadership. And the leadership, if we be honest, is unprepared. We talked about this the other day, the unprepared pastor. This was maybe a week and a half ago now, 2 weeks ago. We talked about Pastor Todd. And Pastor Todd and everybody was talking about all the stuff that happened with Ishtar and certain things that he does as far as LGBTQ plus talk and all these different things or whatever. Hey, buenos dias. ¿Cómo está? Right? And all these things that are out now. And we talked about this, and everybody talks bad about him, but I had to tell everybody. Hey, first things first. Pastor Todd was made a pastor at 15 years old. In our culture, you're not supposed to be a rabbi till you're 30. He was only halfway there and probably did not have the training to get him halfway to being a rabbi. But here he is at 15. Of course, he's going to start making childlike and immature decisions. How you doing, WCP? Of course, he's going to make childlike and immature decisions because he himself is a child. And he hasn't even been trained according to the standards of what he supposedly is supposed to be keeping. If the 15-year-old is in leadership, then we can't be surprised when people are acting like 15-year-olds in the spirit. If that's the most training that he got was the 15-year-old training, then that he's going to pastor people as a 15-year-old boy. So we have a problem, because you might not be called to be a pastor, but what if you're called to make sure that you train up pastors as a community? I wouldn't even say what if. I would say you are called. Maybe I would have said what if, but the Holy Spirit corrected it. Praise y'all. How you doing, MIT Jenny? See, Yashadal Israel, yep, we have a problem. The criticism and the construction, watch this. If somebody gives me constructive criticism, then the criticism must be used to construct. Hallelujah. If somebody's going to give me constructive criticism, then I must criticize, I must critique, right? I must be able to accept something that is going to construct. This is our issue. We're not trying to construct. We're trying to use criticism to tear down, because that's what the world is going to do. And the world is supposed to do that. They're supposed to be anti-kingdom. I'm not mad at the world for doing their job. Right? What I'm getting frustrated about, though, and what Yahweh is frustrated about, and what Yahashua is frustrated about, what Hakodash is frustrated about, what the angels are frustrated about, what true Israelites are frustrated about, what even those who are trying to become Israel are frustrated about. Matter of fact, some people in the world who see you out and out are frustrated about is the fact that you have started tearing each other down. You have critiques that demolish. You have critiques that destroy. You have critiques that decentralize. You have critiques that disintegrate the kingdom. but you never have critiques that construct the kingdom. Revelation chapter 2, Revelation chapter 3. Yahushua talks about the greatness of the 7 assemblies, except for one of them that had no greatness in them at all. The last one, the assembly of Laodicea. All the other ones, Phrygia, Smyrna, Ephesus, Philadelphia, etc. All of them. He says, man, you guys are doing well in this area and doing well in this and doing well in this and doing well in this. And I appreciate you. And you have martyrs and you've been faithful here. You've been faithful there. And you've called out people that said that they are apostles and they really are not. And you've realized that there are people who say they are Israel and are not. And you've realized that now as Israel, you're supposed to teach others. And you're doing this and you're doing this and keep it up. He says, however, Ephesus, I got something against you. Let's just deal with Ephesus, because we could talk about Balaam doctrine. We talk about that all the time, the 3rd assembly. We could talk about the 2nd assembly, that you need to realize that you are Israel. We could talk about the 6th assembly, that you need to realize that he's opened doors that no man can shut, shuts doors that no man can open for you, and therefore be ready to teach as Israel and allow people who are grafted in to learn at your feet how to worship and realize Yah's going to show you that he's always loved you. We could even talk about the 7th assembly I talked about, to where, hey, there's some people that he wishes he knew if you were hot or you were cold. Right? You say you're Israel, but when you do stuff, I can't tell if you're hot or you're cold. You're lukewarm, because you're lukewarm, you make me have to spew you out of my mouth. You're not prepared correctly that you can even be digested by me, let alone by anybody else who's coming in here. So I got to get you out of the body, because you're going to mess things up. We could talk about those things, but what about the 1st assembly? What about the 1st assembly, where he says that you do all these great things, but here's the problem, is that you lost your first love? He gives a constructive critique. He says that you can't that in order for you to construct this thing well, I know that you can preach. I know that you are willing to die for certain causes. I know that you love to call upon my name. I know that you call out apostles that aren't apostles. He said, but that's not enough to construct a nation. How you doing, Dice Dapper? Right? I'm sorry, you said you didn't really justify the what was justify the what? I'm sorry. And hello to you, Trey J. Is it Trey J Zebu? Right? These are things that we have to be. Yeah, we always have to be willing to sit and learn. But even to construct something, the critique has to be there, but the critique needs to be something that comes from in-house. And it needs to be something that's based off of the word. This is the issue that we're having, is that people are critiquing you in ways that you should have been critiquing yourselves based upon the word that you claim that you follow. Israel, we have a problem. We're doing the same thing that everybody else said that we hated so much. You becoming camp hoppers instead of church hoppers. Or you hopping in between the church and the camp now. Or you're making holy days what you want them to be. Right? People want to do communion, but hey, I'm gonna do communion, but I'm gonna eat all the food I want to eat, but I'm gonna just go ahead and say it's communion. You might as well just call it Easter Sunday. Right? The same critique. See, you haven't critiqued yourself. It's interesting that you left everybody because of how you criticized in order to make sure that you tore them down so you could see what they really were. But you haven't built up anything. See, a lot of people have learned how to criticize but haven't built up. There's something called reciprocity. Shabbat Shalom. How you doing, Minister Shante? There's something called reciprocity. Reciprocity basically means, hopefully for you, means that if I give something, I'm supposed to get something back. You said we appreciate everyone who they are. Well, maybe you do, but not everybody in the world does, and obviously not everybody who shares this belief does, and not everybody who walks around does. See, because there's something called reciprocity, and I'm not going to go ahead and just go off of common sense. See, we're going to talk about kingdom sense, and when you're in the kingdom, you live at a higher level, and when you live at a higher level, you don't look down on people to judge them, but if you're at a higher level, you look down and you can see things from a higher level. And right, it's like if you've ever spoken on the stage before, you have to get used to having stage presence, because there's certain ways that people will see you because they're looking up, but you also have to realize there's certain ways that you have to get used to looking down without also looking like a totalitarian or coming to somebody who's mean. And yes, Kent, of course, we should repent. Amen. Yeah, you see to help. You got to speak to help and not to diminish. Okay, Trey. All right, hey man. I don't really glean where we're going, but cool. I'm glad that you realize you're black. That being said, right? That being said, you know, we have to get to a place where we recognize truth, right? We have to get to a place to where it's not your truth, multiple truths. And we have to start to construct something. See, if I'm going to construct something, the construction doesn't even start at the foundation. The construction starts at the vision. It starts at the blueprint. One of the things that we have to be honest about is that many people will talk about the Bible and you've never learned how to read a blueprint. The blueprint is going to be culture to show you how to even deal with something, right? You got to deal with a blueprint. What's the blueprint for building the kingdom? What's the blueprint? We talk a lot of a great game. What is the blueprint? How do you read a blueprint? You know, a door and a blueprint doesn't look like a door, at least not what you're used to, right? Matter of fact, my sister is the first person to kind of introduce this to me when we were young. She's somebody that's into engineering, and also so is my little brother. But she's heavily into engineering, now works in the field. And she was somebody who, when we were young, you know how people play like the Sims game and stuff like that. She wouldn't play the Sims game. There was like this thing where she wanted my father to go out, and so he bought. And back in the day, but this was expensive. You know, he went out and bought a program that basically was supposed to you building homes, and and it would turn. It was like, I guess it was kind of like a game, but it really wasn't. Right? It was training. And what you would do is you would have to basically build a blueprint, and you would build a house, kind of like what they do on The Sims, but not the same thing. And so you would have to build this blueprint though. And then after that, it would turn it, right? You could actually see the house once you press the button. You could actually see what the actual house looked like. But when you were, but they didn't sugarcoat it. So when we would try to um, build a house, you would have to see like you would basically make the lines, and the lines would come up as a wall. You knew that a certain line was a wall. If it was a solid line, that meant that it was something, a wall, or even, you know, the wall, or it was something that you couldn't walk through. You had to think about foundations. So you had to think about how much stuff and how much weight was going to be able to be put on something, right? Because the foundation is not just only to hold the house, but it holds everything that will be in the house. If you saw a dotted line with a with something that was like solid that was at the end of it, and then you saw like a dotted line, but then it was next to solid other solid lines, you had to know, oh, that's a door. Somebody saying it's a door. The toilet didn't really look like a toilet. It looked like something that was kind of angular, but you had to realize by looking at it that was a toilet. So even as a child, and I haven't continued to be proficient in it. I've not continued to study, but as a child, I realized that there's a different way of looking at a building. See, if I look at a building when I walk in it, I when I'm thinking of on a blueprint level, I don't see the finished product. But when I'm looking at a blueprint level, I realized, okay, that's a cornerstone, or that pillar is there specific. Like somebody be like, that's a random place to have a pillar, and I would say, ooh, you know what? They must have remodeled the building, and that pillar has to stay in position because even though that pillar looks ugly there, if they remove the pillar, the whole structure probably falls down. How you doing, WIT? Right? I was able to see some things. My sister was more developed than I, but I learned to see some things different even in childhood because I learned to see the blueprint. So when I walked in the building, I didn't just walk in the building. I learned to see the blueprint, and I had to learn. Therefore, even though I've never worked in construction, right? At least not, you know, I've done some stuff on some houses, but I've never really worked in what you would call like the construction, um, you know, career. However, I learned how to think like an engineer to a certain degree. See, and you have to learn how to look at the blueprint. So people will try to read the word, and they'll tell you that the word is the blueprint. I'm about to mess with somebody's theology, but you can't read the word if you haven't first read the blueprint. I'm about to mess with somebody. See, somebody, I get asked this all the time, and this is something that they asked even when I was in church and when I was even a Jehovah's Witness, when I was young and all this stuff, and even when I was agnostic for a little bit. People will ask a question. They'll say to you, "Where should I start in the Bible?" And people don't like it, or they even say, "What version of the Bible should I read?" And they want me to, they will say the Savad or the Kepher or the KJV or the Jerusalem Bible or the NKJV or the 1611 King James Version, or what about the Amplified, or start here in the book of John or start in the book of Genesis. And I give an answer that people don't like, but it's real. Hey, Shabbat Shalom. How you doing, Sister Toya? I give an answer, and the answer is real. You ready? If you want to know where to start in the Bible, you must start with the culture. The culture is the blueprint. You must start with the kingdom. You must start with the king's vision. If you don't know the king's vision, you can read the Bible 7 times a week and still never be able to find out what it's talking about. Some of you have read the Bible every year, once a year, on the plan that they give you in those little pamphlets and stuff, and your daily bread and stuff like that. And I'm not even saying daily bread is bad. Get you a daily bread. It's something that's great. It'll keep you on track. But so you can read the Bible once a year for 40 years straight and still never know what Barashat is. Still never know the difference between Elohim and Elohim. Not know the code, right? We talked about that. We got a whole series on that on our playlist, right? On the code, right? If you don't know the code, right? Somebody will tell you, "Oh yeah, 666. It means this. It means that." No, it's 603 scoring six. It is the number of a name, and in Hebrew, it means the same name as even if you read the Septuagint in Greek, where it is 616. If you know the code and you know how to write it out, you already know what the name is. It gave you the code when it gave you the culture. If you know the Hebrew characters, the Paleo Hebrew, and you know exactly who was there at the time and the season, and you know the interpretation, then you will not have to work that hard to find out who Neven Kassar is and what that spirit is that you need to be aware of, that's still dealing with things where you're living a very Greco-Roman life in your romantic values that have even turned up in Roman Catholic Church values that now has turned into the second beast, to where now you're going ahead and allowing it to be Protestantism that basically has become that Germanic God thing that can be whatever you want it to be. Amen. So if you want to get off the sincere milk, and sometimes you got to get the code. This is why when we talk, people will talk either positively about Paul or negatively about Paul, Pavel or Paul. They'll talk negative about Apostle Paul because they are trying their best to say that they're New Testament only or Old Testament only. Time out. Time out for that, because there's only one testament. Just because somebody wrote Old and New Testament in there, that has nothing to do with your culture. It has nothing to do with your people. None of the prophets wrote that in. None of the apostles would have known what that was. It wasn't until you started getting into Alexandrian doctrine, and now what y'all are trying to call Gnostic stuff, which didn't even exist back then, but what you're trying to call the Gnostic gospel, and what you're trying to call what Constantine did, and all these different things or whatever, and you don't realize that they did not even have that in there. Come on, right? That Balaam doctrine, the Nicolaitans doctrine is something different. That Old and New Testament is something different. There's only one testament. Adam lost it. We just talked about this last night. Come on, y'all. Adam lost it. What's in the second Adam got it, right? What was the difference? The first Adam didn't even make sure that he covered his wife. The second Adam was willing to die for his wife. But the first Adam lost the covenant, the testament. The second Adam got it back. It was always one that we were searching for. But even in that, you've learned division, because you've learned how to divide the word of Yah. So if you've learned how to divide the word of Yah, how are you ever going to read it in a holy manner? Because you got to put a W before that H. If it's not whole, if it's divided between old and new, then how is it one? Who is the second Adam? The second Adam is Yahashua, who people nowadays try to call half man, half Zeus, or try to call Jesus, right? Nobody believed that there was an Old Testament in the Old Testament. Nobody believes that the Old Testament had to be gotten away with in the New Testament, if you believe in using those words. You know how I know? Because people in the New Testament use and quote things from the Old Testament. And then let's not even get into, what about the Apocrypha? What about Jasher? What about the Chronicles of Noah? What about Enoch? But when you're already split on the word, forget even the splits that you have in your own Christianity. When you're already split in the word, we already messed up. And by the way, if you don't like what I said about half man, half Zeus, yes, Zeus, right? Demasis is the daughter of Zeus. Pegasus is the horse of Zeus. Zeus is Zeus. So yes, Zeus is not transliteration. It is half man, half Zeus. Some of you would say it's praise Zeus, right? I don't necessarily go with that. I get why you get that and where people get that from. If that's what you want to use, feel free to use it, right? I'm just trying to tell you, you got to realize, but you don't use etymology. Why don't you use etymology? Because you're not looking at how words are constructed, and therefore you can't take constructive criticism when somebody critiques the words you're using, because you've never looked at how the words were constructed in the first place. Did Yah construct those words? Did those words get constructed based off of what Yah constructed? Or are you just willy-nilly and misinterpreting and therefore appropriating something that should have never been misappropriated in the first place? This is why people say, man, you too tough on these words. You too tough on this. You too tough on that. No, I'm not. You can't be too tough on the word of Yah, because man should not live by bread alone, but by every word. Give me something that's not his word, and it must be plucked up by the root. That's Matthew chapter 15. The Messiah himself said that in Matthew chapter 15. Anything that's not planted of my Father must be plucked up by the root. And here's where it gets really difficult for some of us, because we can't take constructive criticism. You don't want to criticize those people because you say, well, I don't want to fight, and I don't want to argue, and I don't want to do this. What do you think Yehoshaphat did when he flipped over a table and said, stop making my father's house a thin or a den of thieves? Acting like foxes out here stealing and taking things. What do you think that is? Oh, well, that's not arguing. That's not arguing. What do you think it is that when the religious leaders came up to him in Matthew 15 and they said, hey, why don't your disciples do the traditions of our fathers? And he said, you don't even take care of, what do you think that is? He said, you don't even take care of your fathers. He said, you're supposed to honor your father and mother, but you find reasons to make sure that you put them in nursing homes and don't give them what is necessary and all that. He said, you guys are out there wilding out. He said, meanwhile, you're getting on them because they're plucking food and doing certain things and not washing their hands up to the elbows and stuff. He said, that's not law. That's your tradition. He said, if you won't follow the law. And then he messed around and he said, hey, you know what? He called all the people over. Hey, y'all come over here. And then started talking bad about him in front of the people. Started talking bad about him in front of the people. He said, in front of him, he said, every tree that my father has not planted, it must be plucked up by the root. And then his disciples came by. Yo, Yashua, be careful. Yo, hold on. Let's talk to you real quick. Hold on a second. Y'all, hold on. He tripping a little bit. Hey, and they were like, yo, you can't be out in these people. You can't talk about the religious leaders like this. You can't do this. You can't do that. And he said, no. Like that's the way it's supposed to be. He's like, if they're gonna be out here wilding out in public and messing these people up, then I'm gonna make sure that people know about it. I'm not saying rip people apart. I'm not saying only look to do, but I'm saying at some point you got to start going in-house in your own community, in your own family, in your own belief system, and telling people that this is not righteousness. Call me what you want. Call me a bad person. Call me evil. Call me this. People call me a simp because I tell people stop trying to have multiple wives. Because I say you should honor your wife. Because I tell people you should honor your husband. And if your husband is honorable, he deserves respect. And if he deserves respect, then he deserves respect because he gives what? Security, and he gives affection. And if he gives security and affection and he deserves respect, guess what his number 2 need is going to be after he gets respect? It's going to be sex, because he's designed to give seed to the day that he dies. That's his physical nature. It's part of his masculine vibe, right? And I'm not saying that he should just get it whenever he wants. What I'm saying is dang it, if he's designed to get to have that, guess what you're going to need to do? You're going to need to be involved with somebody that you're willing to stop being so holy with, or even using that as a weapon against. And you're going to go ahead and need to be able to make sure that 2 become 1 sometimes, because that's what marriage is. And somebody doesn't like it, but you got to construct that from in-house. You got to reconstruct what has been deconstructed and rebuilt. They rebuilt something with bad blueprint. That's a bad blueprint. This is why your sex ed classes should be coming from in-house. Your children are learning sex from all these different people because they have it in them to become one, and you have not guided them on why, when, where, how they should become one. So now here they are becoming one, having all these babies, and you're sitting up and saying, I didn't train them to be like this. You didn't train them. You said school system train them. You didn't train them. You said HBO train them. Skinemax train them. Come on, somebody. Y'all gonna act like I'm the only one. Skinemax trained you. You got sex ed from, I don't even know what site you're up. xxx whatever.com. I used to be on there. What was, I don't even remember what the ones were that were popular back then. Whatever it is, your video games, yeah, trained them on sex. The hip hop artists trained them on sex. I learned more words about sex and cursing in school, in elementary school, than I did almost anywhere else. You hear what I'm saying? Softcore porn taught them. And I'm not just talking about stuff that was on Skinamax or that NC-17 stuff, which was a doozy sometimes. I'm talking about rated R stuff right in their face, seeing men's phalluses right there on the screen, seeing women's vaginas and stuff right there on the screen. It was almost every day. And then of course, yeah, cartoons. We've talked about that before. You're not going to act like the look. They, you know what they do with porn. A lot of the porn is nostalgic, right? They call a lot of this NPC stuff. You see this stuff where people are on there. Yum yum. Thank you. Ride the cowboy. Y'all seen that stuff before? That wild stuff that's out there now, where people are doing that. That's because people are nostalgic. Now they want control. See, a lot of men are cowards when it comes to stuff because we taught them about dating, and dating's not biblical anyways. And now everybody's been telling them how to date and telling them they don't have the right to do this and they can't approach a woman and they can't walk to them and this and that, versus being trained on what marriage is. So now they're paying to have people get to act like they can control somebody virtually. But it's not just a virtual person now it's a real person. We've gone past I want a 3D relationship. Now you want to be able to, and so now they're giving gifts and stuff, and they're doing it on TikTok and all this stuff, and they're doing live sessions, and they're doing this stuff. People are acting like Michael Morales and Spider-Man, and people are giving them stuff. People are acting like anime characters. People are just sitting there, whatever, and doing all these different things. And nobody within our community ever stopped to say, this is evil. This is wild. Something is wrong with you. Why are we doing this? Yahweh says, Yahashua says, the Vakakudash says, Moses established, Daniel established, Ruth established, Esther established. Nobody's out here saying these things in-house. And now those same people who have that same mentality and were manipulating, have that same sexual perversion, guess what? They are become your leaders, because nobody checked it at the door. Don't come through the gates of Israel and nobody checks that behavior at the door. Yeah, Sir K doesn't, yeah, the church doesn't teach on the subject either. Nobody's checked it. The church taught you how to date. The church had singles ministry. The church said, let's go out and do this. I remember it was wild. This is teenagers. I was going to this, they're probably way bigger now, but they had just bought and it was empty at the time, but they were having service, or empty in comparison, right? They were still building stuff, but they had bought like this old Walmart or something like that, and it turned it into a church, or we're turning it into a church. And they would have these services, and they would have the teenagers come once a week, once every other week, something like that. And they would have what they would call youth night. And I never went. However, I had people that went because they were trying to see if their children should go. So they went to check it out, and they were telling me that basically it was a nightclub. And I'm not talking about, oh, they just played worldly music. They did that and stuff like that. But I'm not even tripping off that as much, because if you know what you're doing, you can still have certain things that are worldly music, but they're not really as detrimental. I know some people don't want to hear me say that. There's a balance in that, right? However, people were grinding on each other on the walls. Girls were wearing next to nothing. And people were saying, well, as long as they do it in the church, it's better than them doing it anywhere else. That's in the church. That then the night after, right? They do it 2 nights in a row sometimes, Friday night, Saturday night, and then on Sunday, praise the Lord, in the same area. You think that the foul stench, the foul spiritual stench of sexual activity that basically was taking place is supposed to now be the same place that Yah wants to be glorified in? Do you think the same place that people are worshiping the deities and spirits of yoga? I'm not saying you can't do yoga stretches. Hear what I'm saying, though. People don't realize a lot of the stuff that you're doing, sayings that you're doing. There's an old saying in Hinduism and in yogaism that without without Hinduism, there can be no yogaism. Without yogaism, there can be no Hinduism. Be careful what you're attaching yourself to, because everything counts. That's why man should not live by bread alone, but what? By every word. How much is every? Every is all. Every is everything. And you don't want to check everything, but everything must be checked at the door. Israel, we have a problem. The people who have had that same spirit, are bringing this stuff in. The people who are talking about Eastern philosophy and pantheism are the same people that get you to a place of pantheism as far as what? As far as polytheism. You said, does the Bible speak on yoga? The Bible speaks against certain things that yoga speaks about. Yeah. Right? Downward facing dog is attached to a dog spirit. Are we supposed to put any spirits above the Most High? So even though it might not talk about it, it still talks about it. You see what I'm saying? Right? It's like somebody will say, the Bible never says anything about pornography. Well, technically it does, because it talks about not just adultery, but we misplace these words. See, you think that adultery is when you cheat on your spouse. Not only does the Bible talk about adultery, which technically is when you've actually gotten a divorce and are then cheating on your spouse, or you gotten a divorce unofficially, or yes, you try to divorce because sex is marriage, marriage is sex. So anybody you have sex with outside of your marriage technically is adultery. And was the divorce actually lawful as far as the Bible says? Because if it wasn't, then you could still be committing adultery. You have to make sure you're purified first, according to the word. But there's also another word called fornication. Right? There's also another word called fornication. That word called fornication, it comes from a word called porneia or porneia. Porneia is where you get pornography from. Pornography is therefore any false image of marriage, not just a physical image, but also an image that you see with your eye, or you have in your heart, or you have in your mind. This is why Yahushua says in Matthew chapter 5, if you read verses 27 through 32, he starts talking about fornication and adultery. But he also says that if you commit adultery in your heart, you have already committed adultery. And he talks about fornication, and he says it is better for you to pluck your right eye out, or pluck out your eye, than it is to keep that eye and keep looking at other people and committing fornication, a false image of marriage, even in thine own head. See, so we're not even teaching that. Right? We're teaching that fornication, a lot of people think fornication means you're having sex before marriage, you shacking up. No. Fornication is any. So somebody can get a divorce based off of fornication, a false image of marriage, somebody not doing what they're supposed to do, not keeping and upholding the law. And you can go to, and we're supposed to really technically first go to the father of the bride, who's supposed to have the sheet that has the seed, the semen, and has the blood, right? The hymen breaking on it. And he pulls out the sheet in front of the husband and the wife. And he says, okay, you want a divorce. Y'all tell me why this thing that I had that's a contract is now supposed to be broken. But we're not ready to have that conversation. See, right after that, in Matthew chapter 5, that's when he starts talking about let your yea mean yea and your nay mean nay. Don't get into something and you don't have to swear on anything. I swear on the Bible. I swear when I jump over this broom. I swear when I put my hands on this. I swear when I give my vow. Let your yea mean yea and your nay mean nay. If you're getting into marriage, you better know what this is. But we're not constructing this right. Israel, we have a problem. And somebody asked about marriage. Are you single until you're married? Watch this. In a sense, I guess the answer would be yes. But watch this. See, it's a cultural conversation. That's why culture always has to be invited into this conversation. When you ask that question, I have to remind you, and you might already know this. I'm just saying, I'm going to remind you that it really reminds all of us, including myself. You're supposed to be married to the Most High forever and always. There is not a person who's in the kingdom that is single. You see the difference of the mind? I'm not talking about your brain. I'm talking about the difference of the mindset. There's not a person who's in the kingdom of heaven who is single, period. You have to be married to the Most High in order to be in the kingdom. So what's supposed to happen is we train you from childhood on what it is to be an adult, or what it is to be a spouse, or what it is to be a parent. And then we let you live your life as an adult. And as a husband who's in his work finds his wife, he submits a resume of sorts. If the wife, who's already a wife of Yahweh, decides she likes the resume, she brings the resume back to her parents. He goes back to his parents. Everybody comes to have a conversation, including people from the community, so they can basically be witnesses of what's going on. And if everybody agrees, then you sign a marriage contract right there that says that you guys will become one. But then there's another step. Then the wife has to go and start preparing herself for her husband. The husband has to start building a mansion or preparing a place for his wife, an add-on to his father's house, so that when the father has told him that he's ready to have his wife in his house, then he goes to find his wife who has the oil in her lamp and has prepared herself. See, you guys do the tradition of the world. So the tradition is based off the kingdom, but the tradition of the world is I don't see you again, and I don't see you for 24 hours before I get married. Maybe a week, because we want to be really pious. The word says that, yeah, y'all might see each other from time to time, but dating's not in our culture. We know what a husband and a wife is. If you agree to be a wife and a husband, everybody's there, then you start preparing yourself to be your husband's, and he starts preparing himself to take care of his wife and be his wife's. So everybody in the kingdom is already married. Even when you go to Ephesians 5:22 and 25, that's where people go. And nobody ever starts with Ephesians 5:21, submit yourselves one to another. But when you get to Ephesians 5:22, wives, submit yourselves to your own husband. You're preparing yourself to submit yourself, not submission, submission. Be submitted to the mission of one husband, not every man you come across, of one husband. Right? There are sisters who are married here and who teach and who preach or who listen to some of this stuff, and they come to me for certain things, and guess what? There are certain times where I have to say, okay, time out, let me just check with your husband real quick. Not because they're even asking anything wrong, this and that or whatever. Their husband is who is the, if it's, is it, I got to ask, is this in line with your mission? Right? I have to ask the question, is this in line with your mission? That's why, by the way, even those of us who are fathers and spiritual fathers, right? We are supposed to make sure that when our daughters and somebody comes looking for our daughters, guess what we're supposed to do? We're supposed to check out your mission. Because if your mission's not correct, but I still allow you to marry my daughter, guess what's going to happen? If your mission's not correct, but I allow you to marry my daughter, I'm already realizing that, guess what? I got to come to a realization your mission might mess her up. And if I allow that thing to happen, it is what it is. Okay, I see you, MIT Jenny. So I gotta be real. And I gotta check out the mission first. What you coming in here with? What is your belief system? I don't care about your credit and this and that or whatever. I care about her heart. I care about her love. See, as her father, I secured her. As her father, I gave her affection. As her father, she cried on my shoulder. As her father, I rocked and cradled her. As her father, see, and now you're going to become her spiritual father. I could never become her physical husband, but I was her physical father and I was her spiritual husband. Now you're going to become her spiritual father and her physical husband. And I need to realize that that's why, does any man give this woman away to be wed? That's where that comes from, because the spiritual father, or I'm sorry, the fatherhood is being transferred from one to the other. That was my little girl. I trained her in the word. I made sure that she did these things. Right? I did those things. So you're going to have to be on the same level, at least, to be dealing with my daughter. Right? You're going to have to at least be on the same level to be messing with my daughter. And not just messing with her, but be living with her, to be loving on her. But also, too, my daughter always was married to the Most High. This is why Ephesians 5:22, going back to Ephesians 5:22 and 25, the word wife there and that word husband there, they actually, if you look them up, even in the Greek context, they're not talking about somebody who's walked down the aisle as y'all would do. Now, in the Bible, nobody walks down the aisle anyways. That's just something that y'all like because Queen Victoria did it, and because your mom and your daddy did it, or because your aunties, your uncles, your friends, whatever did it, or because you played with Barbie doing it, or whatever the case is, you want to do the same thing, right? Our culture is a little different as far as our marriage ceremony is. The marriage ceremony and the marriage actually take place at the same time. But, I'll leave that alone for another time. We don't have that much time left, right? But long story short, there's a lot of stuff that you're bringing. And so somebody starts to criticize that and say that that construct is wrong, and what you're constructing in your life is wrong, and you don't want to hear it because, no, I'm saved, I'm sanctified, I'm filled with the Holy Ghost. How dare you, sir? How dare you speak down to me as if I'm some peon? I've been going to church. This is what you sound like. You sound like a different kingdom. You sound like a colonizer to me when you start saying that. You sound like a Nicolaitan, somebody who conquered people who are lay people. You speak down. You say, I can hear it in your voice and your tone. You get snooty and you say, how dare you, sir? How dare you even imply that somebody such as myself it could even be somebody as dignified as I, you could find anything indicative to be able to show that I am not as high and lifted up as I really am. How dare you tell me, sir, that what my grandmother did and what her grandmother before she did anything that was not of value? How dare you tell me that I do not know the word of God? How dare you tell me that I am not the woman or the man of God? Do you know how many years that I have sat there and toiled and toiled and toiled, and how many so people, and how Jesus made a way and this and that? And then I say, well, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm just trying to tell you that, his name's not even Jesus. How dare you, sir? The English language is everything that I know. And since it's all that I know, it must be all that is there is. And it has made me great. It has gotten me job after job after job. It has gotten me preaching opportunity after preaching opportunity. It has gotten me relationship after relationship, sir. How dare you? But you're only supposed to have one relationship. Well, no. See, now get out of my house. Get out of my house right now. That's what you sound like to me when you start going against the word. We have a problem, Israel. You sound like the Nicolaitans. You sound like the oppressor. You sound like the person who's against your people, because you won't even see who are my people. You sound like the person who took you away. You sound haughty. You sound high-minded. Ooh. Do you not know how many languages I'm able to speak, sir? How dare you talk to me in such a manner? That's why a child can't lead you. Some of your children got a word for you, and a child can't lead you anywhere because you're busy telling them how dare you. And Shabbat Shalom to everybody coming on. How are you doing? They're confused. They're under the teachings of the enslavers. Yeah. I had somebody, a Methodist, right? And a sister who we had mad love and respect for, especially some stuff she was going through, the behind the scenes that people didn't know. And all that, and we got to the point. I was helping the church out. I was on my way out of church, but I was still helping the church out because this church needed help. I said, I'll help you. I said, y'all know what I'm about. You know what my beliefs are. You kind of know that I'm all the way out on this. The only thing going to be keeping me in church is going to be you guys. But I'll go ahead and, do it was kind of like a sort of interim pastor thing. But I ended up doing it for a couple of years. And it was more so to help a pastor who had to take care of some family issues. And so we're getting ready to get into communion stuff, right? And the sister is, everything she always talks about, including teachings and stuff, is always going back to being Methodist. They were supposed to be a non-denominational, but that's not how this stuff works. But nevertheless, it was, well, when I grew up and I'm a Methodist and blah, blah, and she didn't even recognize that Methodist really comes from methodology. The person who started the Methodist faith, which has a lot of stuff in Ishtar, believe it or not, too, they tried to somehow change that into Watch Night service. That's not true at all. They had a lot of weird stuff in there, but nobody wants to talk about it anyways. But the person who started the Methodist movement, if you will, is somebody who believed that he had the methodology, kind of like when you deal with an Amish person, right? And they believe that nothing should go past what they did or whatever. Well, he believed he had the proper methodology and nothing else could be introduced. And if it was sinful. It was evil. So we got to the place of where we're talking about how we're going to do communion. And I know how the church communion thing goes, so I'm cool. I don't, I'm Passover, but I'm like, hey, okay, as long as we do this and we explain that really this should be Passover, but we're doing this right now, and this is why we started doing it, whatever. All right, cool, let's go ahead, but let's make sure we at least make mention of Passover, because I'm not going to put communion above Passover. We even got past that. You know where we had the problem? And this is why we got to start dealing with this stuff in-house, because people are coming in criticizing and you don't know some of this stuff. Where we got to the problem where she couldn't stand it anymore, and where she started giving me the how dare you, sir. She started doing that when we got to whether or not we should wear gloves. Right? Everything was straight before we got to the part that you should wear gloves. I mean, and she didn't like the stuff necessarily, but she was willing to even, and look, I give her credit. She was wading in the water for the first time. She was double dutching. She was like, all right, everything you saying is true so far. Okay, she was jumping in. She was doing her thing. She made sure the motion was right, though. She's supposed to try every spirit by the spirit. That's cool. But it was up, and everything was fine up until we started talking about the gloves. And I just told him straight up, I said, look, no offense, if this means that I got to sit at the piano and just play through the stuff, whatever, I'm going to make it a point to separate myself from the glove thing. They were like, and especially her, She started losing it now. What you mean? And other people already knew because I had already taught this before. She had heard it before, but she wasn't ready for this at all as far as we might actually not wear the gloves. And I said, well, you know the reason why they wear gloves, right? They wear the white gloves because black people were not supposed to have black hands touching white things, or I'm sorry, things in the church because they could make it impure. So during prayer, you had the usher stand in a certain spot, and they would have their hands over their hands like this, right? Even some of the Amun Ra stuff or Amun Ra stuff that people talk about, you can put in there as well. But they put their hands like this to show where their hands were. They put their heads down and stuff. They would always be in a position where you could see them, but they weren't seen. And during offering and stuff, this is why you would have somebody, they carry the offering plate, and oftentimes you'll see them have what? One hand behind their back, right? And they have one hand behind their back because they're trying to ensure that people can see that they're not going to reach in with the other hand, right? But you wanted white gloves on them because just in case, what if they touch somebody, or what if they touch the sacred, relics that are being used? They made sure that you had on white gloves, which is why a lot of cartoon characters that are black have white gloves. Some of them still to this day, right? So she started losing her mind. This woman who is nice, sweet, and I still choose to remember her as nice and sweet as she won't be. But man, when we got to that white glove thing, right? Even her own son was the one that had taught me about the reason why we do the finger thing and put our finger in the air. I had to research it after her son taught me that we put our finger in the air because you had to make sure that the slave master knew where you were going. That's why people do that still to this day, right? That's where that came from. So, like, I was just simply telling her something that even in her own family is known. But see, it got to a place to where, no, how dare you? How dare you try to deconstruct what has been constructed? Do you not realize what this great, wise slave master taught us about ourselves? With this great colonizer and changer of the word, the supervisor of our souls has told us who we are. Everything was straight till we got to the white glove thing. You see what I'm saying? And so I'm just telling you, Israel, we have a problem because we might look at everybody else, but we don't want to admit that there's some wild stuff going on here. Where in the word does it say that your woman's face got to be covered up for her to live? See, I wish I could just say this with somebody else, but we got to be honest about it. We just got to be. Thank you, MIT Tracy, appreciate you. We got to be honest about that. Where did that come from? That's not yours. Where did it come from that a modest apparel means that your woman can't ever wear earrings? When Rebecca would have probably had a nose ring attached with a chain to an earring. Where did that come from? Where did it come from that you think that men are not supposed to have long hair and that women are supposed to do this and that's modest apparel? And you never read the rest of 1 Corinthians 11 where Paul says this is not our custom. And Paul is a Hebrew of the Hebrews. He is a Benjamite. If anybody knows the culture and tradition, he does. He tells you that he was talking to the Corinthians and not to the Israelites. And then he says, but this is what custom I did give you. And then he goes into Passover. Israel, we have a problem. Yeah, start looking at ourselves and our closed minds. This traditions we've adopted. Matter of fact, Romans chapter 10, verse 1. It is my prayer. This is what Paul says. This is my prayer that Israel would be saved. Romans 10:2. Israel got into a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't even have to do with us. I'm sorry, no, excuse me. Got out of order. Romans 10:1. It is my prayer that Israel be saved. Romans 10:2. We have a zeal for Elohim, but it's not according to knowledge. It's not according to intimacy. So therefore, Romans 10:3, we got into everybody else's culture and not our own. And now we got into a place where Romans 10:4, we're not going in the direction or towards the end that is Yahshua HaMashiach. But Romans 10:5, we need to get back to what Moses taught. Romans 10:6 and 7. I don't have a prison to put you in or a heaven or hell to put you in. It doesn't belong to me. That's not what I'm doing here. However, Romans 10:8, we got to get back to business because Romans 10:9, if we don't have the same logic, or we don't have the same logic, confession, homologia, if we don't have the same logic that the Messiah had when he was talking about the law in Matthew 5:10 through 12, Matthew 5:17 through 20, Matthew 7:12, if we don't have his same logic, then we can't be saved. And we can't even believe that Elohim would raise us from the dead, because the only reason we can believe he raised Yahashua from the dead, and that means anything to us, because we're fellow heirs with Christ. But we got to ask ourselves, see, Romans chapter 10, verse 16, who shall believe our report? Because Romans 10, 13 through 16, anyone who calls upon the name of the Lord, they shall be saved, true. But how can one be saved if they don't believe? And how can one believe what they have not heard? And how can one hear what is not being preached? And how can one preach if they have not been sent by the Most High? For how beautiful are the feet of those who are in the way. Therefore, who shall believe our report? That's the hour it's talking about. It's not everybody's. It's ours. This is why I say I'm not worried about somebody teaching my child. That's our child. That's why at 11 a.m. Eastern New York time today, our babies are going to be taught the way they've been being taught by the Honorable Maya, and we're going to continue to teach them their culture, and we're going to continue to make sure they see things that look like themselves, and they're going to continue to learn their own language, and they continue to learn the alphabet that some of us are now just starting to get in school now as adults, and in our 50s and 60s, they're going to be getting when they're 4 years old. How you going to walk up to these spiritual daughters of ours? Not just mine. These spiritual daughters of ours, they're our daughters, they're our sons. How you gonna walk up to my spiritual daughter who at 4 years old is already learning how to read and write the alphabet? And by the time she hits 24, and you try to hit her with some rap, the spiritual rap even, and she says, well, do you know what shot means? See, that we're training a wife right now. I'm not waiting until she starts feeling horny for the first time. Please forgive